Hi everyone, so this is just going to be a quick video to talk to you about firstly the discussion part of the investigation, but to also go through some other information that I didn't include in the lesson this week. So you should now have all of the information you require to start the discussion of your investigation once you complete tasks 1 to 4. So one thing that I did want to talk about, so we are not going to change the deadline. The deadline will stay at the end of week 10. Now for task 4, when I first told you about that task and how you had to create costing, I said that you should shop around between Coles and Woolworths to find the best deal. Realistically, when we actually think about applying this in a real life situation, the person that is buying this menu is not going to have the time to go to both Coles and Woolworths. This is also a scientific investigation, therefore you need to keep as many variables constant to make sure that there is only one thing that is affecting the independent variable, in this case the healthy eating, but also the cost. So you should choose either Coles or Woolworths as your shopping list and shopping costs so that you only have one source of money. So moving on to the actual report, which is task 5, that is to be done individually. This report should be written up like the other investigations that you've written up before. So it should first include a purpose, a reason why you are doing this. It should also include a hypothesis to be tested, which you should just be able to grab from the task sheet. You should also have an introduction that is around 100 to 150 words that briefly describes the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, which is the pie chart, and the Australian Dietary Guidelines, which are those 5 guidelines that I talked about last week. The first 3 guidelines, guideline 1, 2, and 3, are the guidelines that you should be focusing on for this investigation, as those are the ones that are relevant. You then also need to briefly talk about who produced these guides and why. As for working out the who and why for your introduction, you can use the Australian Dietary Guidelines summary, which actually includes an introduction about why these guidelines were created. So have a read of that. It will help you with that part of the introduction. Moving on to the method, you can just write C task sheet for this section, as you don't need to include the method. Moving on to the results section, you should include both menu A and menu B, showing the number of serves in table format, which is the exact same table format that's in Wiki. So you need to include both of the completed menus, not just your part. You also need to include the 2 detailed shopping lists, which will come together once everyone's done their part for task 3, and you also need the total cost for each menu, which is task 4. Moving on to the discussion, analysis and evaluation, which is the bulk word count of your investigation. Firstly, you need to compare both menus referring to the number of serves for each food group. Not only does this include the 5 food groups, but it also includes discretionary choices as well. This section here is quite straightforward. You just need to compare the unhealthy compared to the healthy menu. For the second dot point, you need to look at foods in each menu and comment on the nutritional balance of each menu. So this means the levels of saturated fat, the sodium content of foods that you've chosen for the healthy menu compared to the unhealthy menu, the sugar content, the fiber content. So you do need to have a look at both menus and comment on the saturated fat, sodium, sugar, and fiber. Moving on to dot point 3, using the Australian Dietary Guidelines, which includes the entire document as well as the pie chart. So we're talking about the pie chart, the 5 food groups, the portions, but also the 3 guidelines about healthy eating. You then need to reflect on why you chose certain foods in menu B, which is the healthy menu. So why did you choose perhaps to replace some of the selections with a wide variety of colourful vegetables? That would be in line with guideline number 2, for example. So you need to explain why or reflect on why you made some of the food choices in your healthy menu. Moving on to dot point number 4, you need to include a reference to the specific macronutrient requirements for a girl between the age of 14 and 18 years old. This is where the textbook pages that you were supposed to read this week comes into this discussion. So girls between the age of 14 and 18 need to have higher concentrations of calcium, phosphorus, iron, and energy, and you probably need to talk about why that is, and then maybe include how you incorporated this into your healthy menu. Alright, so dot point number 5 is quite a simple, straightforward one. You just need to comment on whether it is costly to eat menu A, the healthy, unhealthy menu, and discuss your findings. So, is it more costly to eat menu A, or is it more costly to eat menu B? So you need to discuss about that. When you refer to the total cost for each menu, make sure that each of these tables has a figure attached to it. So you can say, according to figure 5, the unhealthy menu was more costly or less costly compared to the healthy menu, and you could put in brackets figure 4. Okay, so it is really important that you refer to your results in your discussion in detail, which means they should have a figure number attached to them. Moving on to the second to last dot point, you need to suggest any improvements to the task. So this is just improvements to the method as it is. How could you improve it to make it better, easier to work with? You may have had some issues with communication with people in your group. So that's where you would suggest any sort of improvements. And moving on to the last step point, you need to discuss the collaborative process, comment on the strengths and weakness of the collaboration, and the outcomes. So here you can suggest what improvements could be made to improve this section of the task. So keep the improvements in the above dot point about the method of collection and design of the menu, and any improvements about collaboration can come down in this paragraph here. So moving on to the conclusion, you just need to, using your results, discuss whether the hypothesis was supported or refuted. You need to comment both on the cost, whether it was actually easy or less costly to have a healthy menu, but you also need to talk about whether you met the guidelines, so guideline 1, 2, and 3, and the pie chart as well. So you also need to include a reference list as well. Now I did point out to all of you that article in the end of topic 2 about junk food is a cheaper option, and you can actually use some of the statistics that they have in that article in your introduction to introduce the idea to the person that is reading this that it is an issue, which is why we are investigating whether it is possible to have a healthy menu that is cheap. So if you haven't already read that article, I highly recommend that you do, because it will give you some relevant statistics that you can put into your introduction. Obviously, you will need to reference that article and put it in your reference list. Make sure you do Harvard referencing. And finally, moving on to the appendix. So you need to include your 6 costing calculations, which you were supposed to do in task 4. Again, that needs to be split up so that maybe each group person is doing 2 costings to create 6 costings in total. And you need to include a record of the collaborative process. So all of you should be able to include emails where you have been talking to people in your group, splitting things up, seeing how people are going, to make sure that you are actually working collaboratively, because you are being assessed on your ability to work in a group manner. Okay, so that's it for how to write up your practical investigation. You should now have all the information you require to be able to start writing that up. I do recommend that you have tasks 1 to 4 completed by the end of next week so that you can start writing up your investigation on the weekend and submit it to myself or Deb in week 9 for drafting. Thanks very much, guys.